Hello and welcome to the pod. I'm Nathan Fink.
I'm Jasmine Torres Allen, and this is New Hampshire Family Now,
a show about building family in the Granite State. Today in the podcast, Jasmine and I talk grief, celebration, and generational transition, and later filmmaker, author, and 2023 recipient of the New Hampshire Literary Award, Thomas Tosi, joins us to talk his new book, The Curse of the Crummy Mummy. Today's show was brought to you by Service Credit Union. You go beyond for your family. That's why Service Credit Union goes beyond for you. Get more for your money, reach milestones sooner, and plan for the future you've earned. Service Credit Union will support you every step of the way to go further than you ever imagined. If you're driven to go beyond, you belong with Service Credit Union. Visit servicecu.org to start your journey today. This podcast was also brought to you by Family Support New Hampshire. Family Support New Hampshire is NH's coalition of family resource centers and family strengthening programs that exist to ensure Granite State families have access to resources so both caregivers and children can succeed, because supported families are strong families. To find a family resource center near you, visit www.fsnh.org.
Once we went fishing, we saw a pike.
You take after your dad with good storytelling, huh?
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Nathan Fink.
I'm Jasmine.
We have a great show for you today, including an interview with best-selling author and recipient of the 2023 New Hampshire Literary Award, Thomas Tosi. But first, welcome to the beginning of the end of summer.
Already?
I know, I can't believe it.
I feel like we just talked about what are we going to do for the summer?
I know. And I look back and I'm like, oh, what I did was a lot of panic. So, but I know you've been traveling a bit.
Yes.
Where you been? How you been?
I've been in Puerto Rico, back home. My grandfather passed away.
So sorry.
He was a deaf businessman. Yes, I know, huh? In the heart of Puerto Rico.
Interesting.
And he didn't let any barrier ever stop him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was just amazing.
Growing up then, how did it change or maybe give you a deeper perspective?
Oh, he was a very involved grandfather.
Yeah.
And it just reiterated for me, the importance of intergenerational family settings.
Yeah.
Because my grandparents were always around. So were my aunts. And so were my, so there was always someone in the house and cousins running around. And, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, he knew every single one of us. And he had a relationship with every single one of us, which was crazy.
Do you mind if I ask you questions about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because I think, death it's a huge subject. It's a taboo,
death
right?
And grief. I've been dealing with the whole grief aspect of it. I think I'm in the middle of it, is what I say.
You mean that personally or in the family unit?
Both.
Or both?
I think both. Because personally, for me, I lost my mother when I was young.
Yeah.
And I had a very close relationship with my grandmother, and I lost her about 2 years ago. So for me, like grief and death, it's a tough and touchy subject because I don't immediately deal with grief right at the moment that it happens.
Right.
I'm very much, okay, what do I do right now? What do I need to do?
Because you're dealing with it. And I guess part of my question, I think, is I'm one of those people that deals with it by not dealing with it. I'm one of those people that deals with it by trying to attend to others.
Yes, very much so.
And that prolongs like the way then I deal with it. Like I don't deal with it until years later, say, where all of a sudden I'm like, oh, why am I spiraling?
Yeah, no, I really preoccupied myself with other people's feelings. I was like, hey, how are you feeling? Like, are you okay? Mm-hmm. I just felt like I was preoccupying myself with comforting, family members and just trying to be that person that someone could lean on and, cry on my shoulder. But for me, it wasn't until like after when, the casket closed and it was kind of like a final like a chapter closing. Right. That's when it hit me. And I was like, oh my God. And it was like a wave of grief, like finally hit me. And I wasn't so concerned about everybody else. And it's hard because being between worlds, funerals here are very different from funerals in Puerto Rico.
Right.
over there, expression is encouraged, lots of crying, lots of, letting it out. You'll hear a lot of people, it sounds like yelling, but it's really just, it's just grief being let out. And so that expression for me was a shocker because I'm not one to be that expressive when it comes to, my sad feelings.
It just occurred to me, was there anything, a barrier between you and what you felt grief can or should look like? Because
absolutely. I'm so used to funerals here being very quiet, very modest, very, there's a way. There's it's very programmatic. Death is very programmatic here. Over there, it's very expressive. There's food around. There's, laughter still happening. Right. People are seeing each other for the first time in years and they're embracing, in a fun manner, there's grief, but then there's also a mixture of like celebration, you know what I mean? That this person is able to bring that many people together in a room.
Did you feel allowed to grieve?
I almost felt like I had to in the moment because over there it's so expressive with grief. For me, I was like, do I cry? Do I, what do I do? Do I hug someone? Because I'm just not as expressive. Right. But it opened my eyes up to me in the sense of like, you truly let it out in that moment instead of keeping it in. Yeah. And it made me question my own, way of grieving myself, Well,
death brings it. People say death brings people together, but it also, in my experience, and when we lost my brother, for a split, I want to say a hot second, you couldn't see the light through us. But I keep thinking about that in terms of, you have this generational transition that just happened, and now it's this next generation's turn.
I think I was scared about too. Is like my grandfather was the patriarch of the family, and even when he retired from the family hardware store, I mean, he lived right next door. So he always had an eye on what was going on in the family business. Yeah. So like he was a very strong figure. Right. And for us to lose such a strong figure in our family life, it was, I think, a shock to everybody, And
so how is that transition playing out across your family?
I think that everybody is trying to rally around my grandmother. I saw my aunts sort of rally together and try to make decisions based on what was happening and, how to take care of her first. And it was almost like everybody just buckled down. And we were like, okay, what are we doing to wrap around abuela, and like making sure that she's okay. Yeah. I saw cousins and aunts do, it was like my aunt set the example and my cousins followed suit. And so I don't know, for me, it was like a big show of family strength.
Yeah. Are there any lessons from watching this type of transition play out that you brought back with you that you might be able to pass through your family unit?
Yeah, I think emotional expression was my biggest challenge and my biggest lesson, because my face says a million words before my words do. But I realized like my level of emotional expression is much lower. And I realized that my aunts were able to keep going and keep doing life because they had emotionally expressed themselves in the appropriate time.
I almost feel like it's like a share it so you don't have to wear it kind of situation.
Ooh, I like that.
T-shirts?
Yeah.
T-shirts.
Yeah, sure.
And when we come back, we welcome Thomas Tosi. Don't go anywhere. Today's show was brought to you by Bank of New Hampshire. For 193 years, Bank of New Hampshire has put customers and communities first. With the expertise to help you realize your goals, their technology makes banking easier, and the friendly faces will make you want to visit in person. Want a bank that has your back? Bank of New Hampshire are your people. For more information, visit bnh.bank or call 1-800-832-0912. Member FDIC. Today's podcast was brought to you by Dartmouth Health Children's. As the only comprehensive pediatric healthcare system in the region, Dartmouth Health Children's promotes health, advances knowledge, and delivers the best patient and family-centered care for infants, children, and adolescents. Shared knowledge from expert providers across the system increases their ability to care for patients and families close to home. From annual checkups to specialized treatments, Dartmouth Health Children's is dedicated to ensuring all children live their happiest, healthiest lives. For more information, visit childrensdartmouthhealth.org. That's childrens.dartmouth-health.org. Today's show was also brought to you by NFI North. For more than 40 years, NFI North has served as an indispensable nonprofit resource for delivering mental and behavioral healthcare services to children, adults, seniors, and families across Maine and New Hampshire. To learn more, visit nfinorth.com. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today on the show, I'm thrilled to welcome filmmaker, best-selling author, and recipient of the 2023 New Hampshire Literary Award, Thomas Tosi, whose writings include works like 6,000 Donuts and the forthcoming The Curse of the Crummy Mummy, now available for pre-order. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and thank you so much for making accommodations to allow me to join you remotely today.
Well, it's my pleasure. Now, I want to jump right into the book because I am a literary nut, and your latest book, The Curse of the Crummy Mummy, which takes place at Green Hill Academy, involves a fifth grade class who sets out to make a mummy movie. Please give an overview of the story that you're telling here.
Well, first of all, I think it might be important for the reader to know that it's part of a series. It's book 2 in a series. My wife and I always used to talk about certain movies and books we saw, and we thought, wouldn't it be interesting if some character you saw in the background of this movie that's not the main character, but they're involved in an incident? Wouldn't it be cool if somebody made a follow-up book or a follow-up movie that's that character's story? And that's what The Curse of the Crummy Mummy is. The first book in the series, which is 6,000 Donuts, the one that was involved in the New Hampshire Literary Awards, the main character is Abe. Bernard appears in that story in an incident on the playground, but it's from Abe's point of view. And you only see so much of the incident, and you don't really know that much about Bernard. So there's a baton pass from Abe to Bernard. And my idea for the series is it will always be Green Hill, New Hampshire, Green Hill Academy, Miss Sorensen's class, but there'll be a baton pass from one character to the next. So it can be a full character's new story in each book. And each book completely stands alone. Yeah. But in The Curse of the Crummy Mummy, Bernard Gawain is a fifth grader who's academically high achieving, but kind of a social outcast. And he doesn't really have any friends. And he has a crush on a girl in his class. Well, when the class decides to make a movie, guess what? He is cast opposite her. So it's kind of his dream come true. That is until his kind of helicopter mom steps in, takes over, and becomes the film's director. So he's if you can imagine, being in the position of trying to impress this person you have a crush on, and your mom is directing you.
Yeah, well, I so appreciate your talking about that, especially bringing the mom character, because the juxtaposition of characters and their desires and the obstacles they face on their journey is where we kind of get the meat of story. But in this particular case, inserting the mother allows us for a different kind of emotional pathway, because that is a complex relationship between you and your parents or between you and your children. So what avenues of experience or emotion did bringing Bernard's mother into the narrative allow you to explore?
Well, the first reason that I brought her in was purely literary, to amp up the stakes, to raise those stakes and increase the ability for there to be conflict and drama. And for what we just talked about, I mean, I'm bad enough trying to impress somebody and be maybe even trying to come off as something you're not, but your parents know you too well. I mean, they changed your diapers and stuff. They're like, oh, who are you trying to be? Right. So it started out as just, I wanted to write a book about a group of kids who are making a movie. And that's not really a subject yet. A subject for a story is somebody does something. So then I focused on, well, there's this one kid and he has a crush on somebody and they're both cast as the leads. Isn't that good? Yeah, that's better. That's better. Right. But it's not really enough. And I've seen that done before. I thought, well, what if his mother steps in as director? And then it was there. So that was the first reason I brought mother in. But in writing the book, I suddenly realized I had to answer all these questions. Why is mother acting the way she's acting? Why is Bernard acting the way he's acting? Why doesn't he understand why she's pushing him so hard? In some ways, it almost feels like punishment, these little rules and things she has for him. She's ruining my life. But then there comes a point in the book where he says to another character, this older adult looks at Bernard and he knows he's upset about something. And he says, well, what happened to you? And Bernard's like, oh, well, I had an argument with mother, but don't worry, I'm fine. And the older character says, and what about your mother? And Bernard thinks, why is he asking about mother? She's the adult. She's fine. And it didn't even occur to him that she was upset by this too, and why she was. So there's little instances throughout the book where he slowly comes to the realization of why she's doing the things she's doing, where she just wants the best for him. And she has to come to the realization. There's a similar scene that's flipped for her, where she comes to the realization that something happens and she's able to step outside herself and see the way she's behaving. And suddenly she sees things from his point of view too, about how he wants to lead his own life. So it allowed me to explore that and try to bring it to a resolution, not a neat tied up with bows resolution, but a path to a solution and that is communication, where Bernard just communicates to his mom, finds a way to do that, and she accepts that, and they talk. They understand where each other's coming from.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty powerful. The idea that everyone we know is going through something themselves is a powerful notion. Now, I do have a short clip, and I want us to take a quick listen to see what that sounds like.
Did you ever have the feeling you were drowning? That all hope was gone, and no matter what you did, the water would just keep rising? That soon you would have to admit it was over, and all that was left was listening to the tank running endlessly, filling the toilet bowl until it eventually spilled out onto the bathroom floor? "Bernard, are you all right in there?" Mother asked, banging her knuckles rapid fire on the door. "Where is all this water coming from?" "Don't worry, I'm fine," I said. I moved to let her in, but I didn't get the chance. Mother threw the bathroom door open. The lock on my bathroom door had been broken forever. Mother said she didn't fix it because you were supposed to be able to get in there in case of a medical emergency. And besides, we were mature enough to know to knock. The lock on her bathroom door worked. That was Mother. Mature enough to knock, but then barging in on me anyway.
I wanted to pick up on something you said regarding the idea that there is also the creation of a story in your creation of a story, which is about the Mummy movie itself. I love this because you have a reality, right? Bernard's reality, his mother's reality, but they're then trying to create a fictionalized reality as well.
Oh, absolutely. The story within a story. And, what were they making a film about? They're dealing with New Hampshire history. And I did some research, and I was looking for the right piece of folklore, the right legend. And there's tons of New Hampshire folklore and tons of legend, but I wanted it to tie into Bernard's interest in old horror movies. And I just couldn't find the right thing. So the whole idea of them making a mummy movie, and that there's a piece of New Hampshire history that involves a mummy wandering around. So basically, I came up with the idea through a lot of research that there's a traveling carnival 100 years ago, and they had a sideshow. And the sideshow featured a mummy, and the mummy escaped from the sideshow. Now, you don't necessarily see all that, but I play with that a lot, and that gets intermingled with real New Hampshire history and current day situations in New Hampshire. So that was a lot of fun to do that.
Yeah. Now, it strikes me that when we tell stories like this, we are in many ways telling our own story, either by inventing the opposite or drawing parallels, or even what you had just mentioned now, your fascination, New Hampshire history, and kind of bringing that to light. When you look over the arc of The Curse of the Crummy Mummy, are there characters or moments where you find yourself?
Every moment. Every single moment is me. The worst parenting moments of Mother in this book are me. The best parenting moments of Mother in this book are me. The worst moments of Bernard being a child of a parent are me, as are the worst. And I used to say, I shouldn't admit this, but the book starts with Bernard being really upset by getting a less than stellar grade on a quiz. And he thinks he's going to hide it from his mother because it hasn't been posted online yet, and they have to get it signed. And he crumples it, and he goes in the bathroom and tries to flush it, and the toilet clogged. I have to admit, that's based on a real life event. A long time ago. I can admit it now. So I used to say, when somebody would say, "Oh, is that character so-and-so?" because they know me and they know my friends and maybe we grew up together, or is that character you? And I used to just say, characters they're like a composite of all the people I knew. But then I realized I was just sort of saying that because that's what writers say. And that wasn't really true. And I realized that, no, they're really all me. It's kind of like if you think about the characters as cakes, every character's a cake, and you're the chef with all the ingredients. All those ingredients are part of you. Your anger, your sadness, your happy times, whatever. And then when you're making any individual cake, you can say, oh, what if you put a little too much salt in this one? What if you put a little more sugar in that one? So it's all coming from you, your ingredients, and you're baking the cakes, but every cake is different. Yeah. So that's kind of, I think, my reality. I don't know about the other writers. I always hear, well, they're composites of people I know. And sometimes I think that's more of a legal issue more than anything else. But for me, they're really all parts of myself, just to a lesser and greater degree in each character.
This to me is really emblematic of the fact that stories matter. I think they matter to us individually. I think they matter to us culturally. And when you're telling a story, especially this one in this book, at a time, 5th grade, when there's transition, that's an powerful moment to kind of behold. So I wanted to play a quick clip around the idea of transition and the tensions it can bring. Let's take a listen.
What do you want? Bridget asked me. We were standing over by the big rock. That is to say, Bridget was standing. I was down on one knee. I have something I have to tell you, I said. Bridget was in the middle of a half circle of girls. They all had their feet shoulder-width apart and their hands on their hips. I was at the center of that circle. I was being judged by a jury of Bridget's peers, even though to me, Bridget had no peers. I wanted to talk to Bridget alone, but the 5th grade girls at Green Hill Academy were like a swarm of krill. If I were ever going to say anything to her, I knew it wouldn't be just her and me. I needed a new strategy. And that new strategy would become my life, or at least my middle school, philosophy. Wait, and you're lost.
Now, how do stories like this one help ease tensions that come in periods of transition?
Well, I mean, when you're in periods of transition, I think especially for kids, it feels like sometimes you're the only person in the world that's experiencing this. Nobody understands it. It's maybe insurmountable as far as you know. There's no solution. And it's not always easy to talk to somebody, least of all, sometimes your parents. So basically, sometimes you just need to know that you're not alone. And I think when you read books and good books, and they have characters and situations that are similar to what you're going through, you understand that. You understand that not only are you not alone, but there have been people who have done that before. And the path is well known. And books are like the signposts that people who have traveled it before you have left for you to help you figure out your way.
Yeah. I really appreciate your formulating like that, because I do think this is how we identify with the world around us. In the fact that these narrative arcs go on, that your book is one in a series that follows people, gives comfort, I think, to us. There is a place to belong in this world, and that's why these matter. And especially now, because I think we exist right now in a period that it's just easier, and I'm saying this as a parent, but also as a person, it's just easier sometimes to pick up an iPhone or a tablet and to have these stories delivered to us rather than constructing them out of, let's say, still pictures or illustrations. So talk to me a little bit about that. Why is encouraging our children to read so important for, say, the developing mind?
Yeah, well, I used that cake metaphor earlier, and writers love metaphors. So I'm going to go into a sports metaphor. Everybody would like to be physically fit if they can be. You want your kids to be physically fit, but basic exercising like calisthenics, nobody wants to do that. It's boring. So we have sports and we have games, right? And they make you run around and jump. And when you're doing all that stuff, when you're competing, when you're trying to get a higher score, you're working all your muscles. You're getting fit, but it's a fun way to do it. Likewise, when you're reading books, and I when I say the right books, I don't only mean quality and thoughtful books, but I mean books that capture and engage you, books that are fun, books that are funny, books that are scary, whatever, but that engage you. When you're doing that, if you think about the fundamentals of a classical education, like grammar and logic and rhetoric, I mean, that sounds boring just to say that, right? Mm-hmm. But when you're reading, you're doing all those things. You're working out the letters, the words, the sentences. You're trying to make sense of the plot. You're trying to figure out why the characters are behaving the way they are. Yeah. So you're kind of exercising your cognitive abilities. You're exercising your ability for empathy. You're exercising your ability to analyze different situations and emotions, but you're having fun. So just like somebody who's physically fit is less prone to injury, somebody who's well-read is less prone to other kinds of injuries, like somebody deceiving them or manipulating them, because they see through that. But they didn't even realize they were developing those skills because they were just enjoying and engaged in a book.
Right. You have to then, through the book, encounter characters with desires, sometimes devious, so sometimes pure, right? So
exactly.
You're living alongside the choices, the heartbreak, all of it. But I know for a fact from, your books, you work very closely with your daughter, Megan, around the illustrations that accompany the stories. And one, I think that is so cool. But two, from a creative point of view, I'm curious about your process. How do you decide what images you're drawing and how they should look with your daughter?
Well, we have a bit of an unusual approach. Megan, her formal training is in animation. She got her degree, her Bachelor of Fine Arts in Southern California outside of LA. And she was fortunate enough to have mentors who were Disney supervising animators during the Disney Renaissance, like the Little Mermaid, The Lion King, and all that kind of stuff. So she wasn't specifically book illustration major. And when I started writing middle grade books, and the tone I had of the book was, I thought, wow, this is perfect for Megan's style of drawing. Because I didn't realize until she went to college and some of her teachers were telling her these things that illustrators and artists in animation are cast the same way actors are cast in the movie for a role. They have certain specialties, a certain style. So when I made that realization, I thought Megan would be great for these. Now, because of her cinematic background, and my degree is in filmmaking also, we tend to talk in terms of camera angles. And what ends up happening is we're unusual because we don't wait till the manuscript is finished, because as it is, it takes us like on average 3 years to complete a book. And we kind of overlap. As soon as I get a little bit of a headway going, I start to point out to her things that I think would be interesting story points for her to tackle. And then she weighs back in with things that she thinks. And then we talk about the illustrations, like, well, wouldn't this be good from a low angle? Wouldn't this be good as a close-up, a two-shot? Oh, we need an establishing shot. People need to understand the geography of this house first so they can picture it, right? And it gets really crazy sometimes where I'm sending her reference photographs of canopic jars, which contain like the people they mummified. It contained their organs. So I'm like, I can only imagine what my Google search history looks like. But we would say things like, Megan, what if there's this shot? And a lot of times we call it a shot instead of an illustration. What if this is a shot of mother plunging in the toilet? She's trying to plunge it. And it's like we see Bernard over her shoulder and he's very nervous. And we were talking about, like, what if the camera's down in the toilet? And so she just takes this illustration and runs with it. And then she'll add to it, or then she'll come up with other ones. So she's on the West Coast. So we Skype or FaceTime or whatever, and we talk about this stuff, and she works on them, and then she just uploads them to a shared drive, and I look at them and send them back with notes. And it's also great because, as I mentioned, she's on the West Coast, as is her brother, and we also we're also very much always in touch with him with his creative projects and seeking input from him. But doing that when somebody is 3,000 miles away, family members, because you're working on this fun, creative thing together, it's another way of not drifting apart, which would otherwise be so easy to do when you're on opposite sides of the country.
Well, that's amazing. Well, Thomas, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. This has been fun.
You can pre-order your copy of The Curse of the Crummy Mummy by Thomas Tosi on Amazon.com or find your copy in a bookstore near you after September 10th. Audiobooks are also available and read by Golden Voice Award winner Michael Crouch.
Taking one of my arms over each of their shoulders, the guys had to help me down the stairs. 1 foot, 2 feet, next step. 1 foot, 2 feet, next step. It wasn't going to take much acting to do the mummy shuffle. "You doing okay in there?" Abe asked. "I can barely see through the slit you guys left," I said. "It's hard to breathe, and my fingers and toes are tingling." "You're good," Dewey said. "Wait until you practice the rescue scene with Evangeline the librarian. That'll get your heart pounding and blood flowing." "What do you mean? What rescue scene?" "Miss Sorensen told us about a new scene she came up with when she drove us over here in the Hypmo," Abe said. "She's definitely going to want to practice that one because she's worried you won't be able to lift Bridget." "Lift her?" "Yeah," Dewey said. "You're going to carry her in your arms, you dog." "Dog? I'm not a dog. I'm a gentleman. I'm a hero. A hero who has to rescue Bridget by carrying her."
And many thanks to the Office of Social and Emotional Wellness, or OSEW, at the NH Department of Education for sponsoring this podcast. OSEW's mission is to advance youth social emotional wellness by collaborating with federal, state, community, and family partners to implement evidence-based, data-driven, preventative, and responsive approaches to lifelong social emotional skills for New Hampshire's students. To learn more about the Department of Education, visit www.education.nh.gov. Merrimack County Savings Bank, where Merrimack style is treating everyone with care, respect, and compassion, proudly supports the mission and efforts of New Hampshire Children's Trust. Founded in 1867, the Merrimack has served people, businesses, nonprofits, and municipalities in central and southern New Hampshire for over 157 years. Visit local offices in Bow, Concord, Contoocook, Hooksett, Nashua, and Wyndham, or go to themerrimack.com. New Hampshire Family Now is listed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or ask your smart speaker to play New Hampshire Family Now.